Good evening and welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm your host, Joshua Solomon, and with me as always is J.P. Marzullo, the Honorable J.P. Marzullo. I keep forgetting your name.
You forget? That's okay. A lot of people forget.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Not a big deal.
It's not summer anymore like last week.
I know, but you know what the problem is? I got all my winter stuff up out of the basement, right? Because I figured we're in winter now, and it's going to be 40 next week. So I never know what to do in this state when you should. It's crazy. It's crazy, but yeah,
well,
it's
the last
winter.
2 days have been brutal.
Yeah.
Just letting the dogs out is just brutal. As always, we are sponsored by the Wilson Hill Pistol Club, wilsonhillpistol.org. The oldest sports shooting club in the state of New Hampshire, 1732 Lakeshore Road. Open enrollment for the club. You can show up on club night, the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. And you can check us out online. You can register for classes. I think the next fundamentals class is on February 10th. It's a Saturday. So, JP, we talked about a plug blowing out of the fuselage of an airplane mid-flight last week.
Yeah, we did.
We talked about that.
Yep.
There's a lot of other stuff going on that and things that have come to light since then.
Sure.
That I want to talk about. And,
So do you want to wait till...
do we want to wait? Or
Yeah,
do we want to?
no, I think, why don't we get
Okay,
our guest
all right.
going here,
All right,
and then
all
he
right,
can
so-
sit and listen to us talk.
All right, all right.
So our guest today is Greg Moore, and today's title we'll use is, because he has several hats that he wears, and I forgot to bring the hats in, so what can I tell you?
Yeah,
So
a day like today, you could use a hat.
Exactly. So he's the senior advisor for AFP Action, and that's that has to do with the presidential race. So, Greg, welcome. Good to see you.
Appreciate you guys having me. Always great to be back on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I got to tell you, it's a busy time of year for everybody, for those folks who are in and involved in politics. This week between Iowa and New Hampshire is really the Super Bowl of American politics.
Yeah.
It doesn't get much better than this. The weight of the political world, and I say the world, not just American politics, world politics is here. I've gotten more.
Everybody's watching.
I have gotten more requests from Belgian, German, Japanese, Italian, British television stations. They want to just talk to just about anybody. You can't walk up and down Elm Street right now without 3 or 4 people sticking a camera in your face.
It's
pretty bad out there. So, but no, I mean, it's if you're a political junkie, you can't beat this. This is a really exciting time, and New Hampshire has a really critical role in this endeavor. I know it's a real popular thing to say, but it happens to be true. Iowa picks corn, New Hampshire picks presidents.
Right.
We're just very good at it.
Yep.
And I think the reason why, what really separates us from the Iowa caucus, now Iowa on Monday had their caucus, First in the Nation caucus, and they're a state of about 3.2 million people. So they're more than twice the size of New Hampshire. We're 1.4 million.
Yep.
And they had 110,000 people participate in their caucus out of a state of 3.2 million.
Wow.
And we're expecting, next Tuesday, we're expecting to have 330,000 people voting in the Republican presidential caucus.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
less than half the size, 3 times as many
yeah.
participants.
Well, there's a thing about caucuses versus primaries, right? In a caucus, it's more like a town meeting. I mean, you have to show up, check in, and be in this gigantic room full of people. And there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of these meetings taking place, right? There's at least one in every county, or is there just one in every county? I'm not sure. But there are literally hundreds of these meetings, these caucuses, and you have to show up and be there the entire time, right? The caucus runs itself, and they have a slate of people, and you vote for people, and they narrow the field down, and then they end up...
And people give speeches.
Right.
Exactly. So it's like a town meeting. So whereas in a primary, I can show up at 7 o'clock in the morning, I can show up at 7 o'clock at night. I can show up as soon as the polls open, I can show up as soon as the polls close. There's like this 12-hour period where people are just in and out, which lends itself to having more people show up. And I think that's why, like in Iowa, there's only 100,000 people that showed up to the caucuses, but it's because you have to be there the entire time.
Oh, there's no question. And to be totally fair, weather played a huge role in this.
Oh, yeah.
A huge role. There was 110,000 people caucus in Iowa this year. 2016, there were 186,000 people who caucused in Iowa. So that just goes to show you how many people looked at the thermostat and said
no.
And to be fair, more power to former President Trump. You know, obviously his supporters are pretty ardent,
Sure.
willing to brave literally minus 30 wind chills. We think it's cold outside today. It's got nothing on where it was in Iowa. So I'll give him a ton of credit for getting his folks to actually show up, and that's a huge thing to do in a caucus. Where, as you said, it's a different thing to ask someone to spend 2 hours in a church basement or an elementary school gym
Right.
than it is to ask someone to come in and spend 5 minutes voting. But I do think that there's a reason why New Hampshire does a much better job of picking nominees and ultimately presidents. You look at Iowa in the last few cycles, whether it was Ted Cruz in 16 or
Yeah.
going back to 12 with Rick Santorum and 2008 Mike Huckabee. Those candidates, some of them ended up going on through the process, but at the end of the day, the candidates that do come out of New Hampshire tend to be candidates that tend to do a better job, particularly of making it through the nomination process. You saw in 2008, the New Hampshire picked John McCain, who ended up being the ultimate nominee. 2012, it was Mitt Romney. 2016, it was Donald Trump. So
Yeah.
how you do in New Hampshire is usually a heck of a lot more determinant on what your fate will be over the long arc of it.
Yeah, I was really concerned about the First in a Nation process that's been going on, and I'm worried that we may not get it in 4 years. It seems like that's the way it's trending. But what you just said is really important, and I think people are starting to understand that we know what we're doing, and we take it very seriously. And we don't always vote for our favorite son and then get crushed in the general, and that's something that's difficult to determine.
And you know what? Think about it this way. 330,000 people. According to the Secretary of State's website, there are 873,000 registered voters in the state of New Hampshire. So out of that 873,000, 330,000 are going to vote in a Republican presidential primary. That's just an enormous number. And it speaks to candidates who can have a broadly appealing message, which obviously helps you in the long run.
Sure.
And here's another thing to consider, which is if you look back in the last state primary we had back in 2022 in September, there were 140,000 people who voted. 140,000. So we're going to go from 140,000 to 330,000, more than doubling it. And I think
Now,
that's
why do we expect a doubling? How can we gauge that? What information do we have to know that that's going to be doubled?
well. First and foremost, we can look at historical data. Back in 2016, there were 285,000 people who voted in the Republican primary. But it's also important to keep in mind that there was also a competitive Democratic primary in 2016.
Primary, yep.
So those swing voters were being split between Republicans and Democrats. There's nothing happening in a Democratic primary this year, so any of those swing voters are likely to get pulled into the Republican primary. Plus, the way we use data has just gotten better and better. Voter participation, particularly since 2012. Barack Obama put together a phenomenal operation. There's a book written about it called The Victory Lab.
Yep.
And if any of you are political junkies, you have to read that book.
Absolutely.
You have to read that book. And we've just gotten better. The data is getting better. The technology is getting better. We're just getting better at turning people out. So 330 is an estimate that we've made internally based on our data partner, but it looks like a pretty solid number based upon how people are describing themselves as far as their interest in voting in the primary. And unlike Iowa, it's going to be low to mid 40s in cloudy, no precipitation, which low to mid 40s in late January is what we call shorts weather in New Hampshire.
Exactly. Exactly.
Lost it.
So, what do you think? How are they going to get more independents to vote in the Republican side? Is that partially due to the fact that Biden's not on the ticket, or I remember the numbers a few years ago where there are more undeclared voters in the state than there are either Democrats or Republicans. I believe that's still true. So
Well,
how,
that's part of that. Part of that is a little misleading because there are a lot of people out there who are independent but are conservative,
Right.
but who always vote in Republican
yeah,
primaries.
and vice versa.
And
right?
vice versa.
Yeah.
There are independents who are liberal and always vote in Democrat primaries.
Right.
Because we don't have closed primaries, those people relish their independent status. They don't either they don't want the party label hanging over them, or they look at the opportunity to go cause trouble in the other side's primary when they don't have anything going on in theirs. So some of those people do exist. I think if we closed the primaries, we would definitely see both Republicans and Democrats pick up a fair number of votes, and then what we would see is that the undeclared, as we call them,
Right.
not independents, undeclareds would actually become a lot smaller. It would probably, instead of being 30-30-40, which is what it is
Right.
now, Republican, Democrat, Independent, it would probably be more like 40-40-20.
Right.
So I think that, and I've been talking with a lot of national media, and I try to express to them, there's a lot of people in the state who consider themselves small L libertarians.
Right.
A lot of people in the
Yes.
state who describe themselves, and they don't want the Republican Party label.
Right.
But they love voting in Republican primaries. And for the viewers who maybe don't know how the process works mechanically, when you go to if you're undeclared and you go to the polling table and you show them your ID and they hand you a ballot, the act of you taking that ballot registers you in the Republican or Democrat primary, whatever party ballot you take. You are registered in that party. So then you go, you vote, you stick your ballot in the ballot box, and then you go on the way out, and there's a table out there where you can re-register as undeclared again. But during that time period from when you picked up that ballot and when you re-registered, you are either a Republican or a Democrat.
Right.
And one of the things that you'll see coming out of this, and the numbers will come out probably a month or two afterwards, is you're going to see Republican voter registration spike because there are going to be a lot of people who on the way out the door don't re-register as undeclared. And that's a phenomenon we see all the time, particularly around presidential primaries. So I think one thing for the Democrats, taking this away from New Hampshire, the presidential primary, first in the nation primary, away from the parties, you're going to see every 4 years you'll see Republican registration spike, but you won't see the same thing among the Democrats, which could ultimately create sort of a structural problem for the Democrats. And I know it's not something that I'm sure someone like Ray Buckley is very concerned about.
Sure.
So this business of, I mean, you bring up something. So the DNC does not want New Hampshire to be first in the nation.
Correct.
And the DNC has declared the New Hampshire primary as irrelevant.
Right.
Meaningless.
Meaningless.
So but there is a Democrat primary taking place next Tuesday here in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not sanctioned, and they've refused to have Biden registered.
Right.
So he's not on the ballot, but there is a primary taking place.
Well, technically, but it's what is described in political terms as a beauty contest, meaning it is not a delegate selection event, meaning no delegates to the DNC convention are going to be awarded based upon the results
Right.
of what happens next Tuesday, which it means technically yes, there will be a primary, but if you know going in that literally means nothing, what's the incentive to participate in that if you're not running,
Well,
getting the opportunity to actually win over delegates, which is what you need ultimately to become the nominee?
It really leads to a couple of things. Let me see if I can find it.
But I would just offer one point. We say the DNC took away the primary. I think it's important to point out
Well,
that it was
I'm not-
Joe Biden who took away the primary. And this is a
Right.
guy who underperformed severely in New Hampshire in the 3 times he ran for president in 2008, 1988, 2008, and then most recently in 2020 when he finished 5th, and he didn't even stay in New Hampshire.
he left.
He was on a plane to South
Right.
Carolina, but before the polls closed. So
Yeah.
I think Joe Biden is disenchanted with New Hampshire and wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be an opportunity for New Hampshire to reflect that disenchantment with him.
Well,
I think
the problem I have is there. I don't think. I think they're going to continue to try to take it away, and so how does that work out? Because we have a state law. They're going to have to get Democrats in New Hampshire on board, but I don't think Democrats in New Hampshire are on board with that.
Well, I would just say this. Our state law guarantees that we will have an election
Right.
before any other election. That said, to the extent that candidates know that there are no delegates on offer in New Hampshire, means that while there will be an election,
Yeah.
it's highly likely that very few of them are going to campaign and build up those type of robust campaigns that we're familiar with in New Hampshire through the years of going out, doing town halls, and meeting people left and right, and going out and just basically doing the things that we historically have built an expectation of how candidates should campaign. So I think that yes, there will technically be a primary, but if the candidates don't show up because there's no delegates to offer, I think we're going to see very little participation, and we're going to lose what
Lots
we used
of
to have.
money.
I don't think we're going to see very little participation. I think we're going to see something. New Hampshire Attorney General sends cease and desist letter to DNC as the party tells New Hampshire Democrats the upcoming presidential primary is meaningless, so vote for Nikki Haley. All right, so they're using the opportunity to screw with the Republicans, right? Obama campaign strategist David Plouffe recommends New Hampshire Democrats tactically vote for Nikki Haley. It's not that the Democrats aren't having a primary next week, is they're trying to disrupt ours.
Well, I mean, if you're a registered Democrat, you can write in Nikki Haley if you'd
Yeah.
like. It doesn't count towards the Republican primary total.
Yeah, you have to have a Republican.
Well, but we just got done talking about this 40% of registered voters who are undeclared. Like, that's who they're targeting.
Well, yeah, if
Right?
for those
and
folks
they're
not
targeting
registered.
him so much that the New Hampshire Attorney General has sent a cease and desist letter to these people.
Well, the cease and desist letter was because that the DNC sent a letter to Ray Buckley, the party chair, that said that that the election was meaningless and pointless, and expected them to go out and educate the public not to vote. And that language runs afoul of state law. That's the state law that says that you can't do anything to discourage people from voting. And so the Attorney General got a hold of the letter addressed to Ray Buckley and found that it would violate the law by suppressing voters. And so he sent a cease and desist, not relative to what any Obama advisor said. He says it was all relative to the fact that they were using that language to calling the primary meaningless and telling the party, the New Hampshire Democratic Party, that they should be telling people not to vote.
Right. And then Biden had all his surrogates come up here, and the governor of Massachusetts came up here too to speak to people, to say, right. I've seen a sign already, like a political sign that says "Write in Biden," and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's crazy.
Well, it would certainly, even though there are no delegates on offer, it would certainly be an embarrassment
If he loses.
If he were to lose the state of New Hampshire. Any sitting president, whether it was going back to George H.W. Bush back in 1992 when Pat Buchanan ran a credible campaign against him,
Yeah.
it certainly damaged him in his re-election campaign, or even Harry Truman back in 1952 when in the New Hampshire primary. That was actually the first year that they actually put the names of the candidates on the ballot. People say, oh, we've had the first in the nation for over 100 years. But it's important to remember that for the first several decades, people would go and they would vote for delegates, not for candidates. And 52 was the first year they put on a ballot. And immediately, Democrats in New Hampshire voted for Estes Kefauver over, and I know JP knows Estes, and he voted over Harry Truman, which caused Harry Truman to drop out of the race.
Yeah.
So there's a risk. There's a real risk for Joe Biden and the Democrats of someone like a Dean Phillips or someone like a Marianne Williamson actually getting a half decent vote coming out of New Hampshire. It just makes his candidacy look weakened.
I don't think anybody can doubt that his candidacy is weakened just by himself. I'm just worried about the whole first in the nation status. And if you've got a national party and a president saying, hey, yeah, we don't care about New Hampshire, we don't care about, I don't think that's going to go away, and I think we're going to be fighting for it. Now, our previous Secretary of State, he was a Democrat, but he fought for 40 years, right? And he was
Bill
very,
Gardner.
Bill
Yeah.
Gardner. He was very good at his primary role as Secretary of State, and that is making sure that every other state and all the parties understood we're number one and we will always be number one. And hopefully our new Secretary of State is someone who's going to fight just as hard. So I'm really worried about that because this is the first time they've really made these motions. Like, okay, not only do we not want New Hampshire to be first in the nation, but we're not even going to put our guy on the ballot.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things that has been a reaction to this is because the DNC said in their demand letter that New Hampshire had to move, get rid of the language making New Hampshire first.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've responded internally within the state is that there is now a constitutional amendment
Yep.
to enshrine the first in the nation status in our state constitution. Therefore, no future DNC could say, okay, guys, you have to move your primary back. Nope, sorry, it's in the Constitution. Can't do anything.
What authority did they have in the first place? It may not be constitutional, but it still is a state law.
Mm-hmm.
What authority does the DNC have to tell us to get rid of it anyway?
They
don't.
can choose not to seat delegates, meaning New Hampshire could go unrepresented by at the DNC
All
convention.
that does is hurt them. I mean, there's not a lot of delegates in New Hampshire, but that's 2 delegates that they may need at some point.
I think the number is closer to something on the order of 40 delegates that New Hampshire produces.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of
And Republicans
votes.
it's 22. I know Republicans
Yeah.
it's 22 delegates, but they have
Well,
some.
that even underscores my point further, though. There's a number of delegates there that a candidate may need at the convention.
It's entirely possible, but I mean that's the way. Mechanically, that's the way. And the courts have ruled over and over and over again that parties can do whatever they want to choose their nominees. They could have a smoke-filled back room. They could do whatever they want. They don't need to pay attention to primaries. They can ignore caucuses. If they just get together and decide this candidate is our candidate, South Carolina back in 2020 is decided to simply cancel their primary and to say that we're just going to award their delegates to Donald Trump. And they said, well, we have to pay for primaries, so we don't want to pay for it.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, parties can really just do what they want, and the
Yeah.
courts have ruled that that's perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
So to the extent that there are no delegates being awarded, why would candidates come here? Why would they build campaigns?
Yeah, there's a lot of money involved with this. I don't know how much money we bring in each time we have one of these, but I know it's quite a bit.
I know that hotel rooms in downtown Manchester are over $600 a night.
Wow. In Bedford Village Inn, I understand that that's been rented out by some people for the whole week.
Yes.
So that can't be cheap to do.
No. I mean, it's a boon to the local
Economy.
tourism, hospitality industry,
Yeah.
primarily in the greater Manchester area, because that seems to be where there's a critical mass of people staying.
Right.
But ultimately, look, we have a strong economy regardless. Our economy would be strong with or without the First Nation.
Sure.
But I'd rather have it than not.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But and I'll tell you, I mean, our organization has endorsed. We endorsed just a little after Thanksgiving. We endorsed Nikki Haley for president. We spent the entire year sort of reviewing all the various campaigns. We met with a number of the candidates. Ultimately, we felt as though she was the best one to move forward and turn the page from what we have in Washington right now, which is an incredibly divisive situation in Washington. If we're going to get people who can help other people win, as much as I personally appreciated the 4 years that Donald Trump spent in the presidency. I know we at our sister organization AFP worked closely with him on the Tax Cut and Jobs Act,
Yeah.
the First Step Act, and 3 Supreme Court nominees. But it's hard to deny that he's bad for business here in New Hampshire. Since Donald Trump was nominated in 2016, we've gone 0 for 11 in federal elections.
Yeah.
Which is remarkable considering that in my time in New Hampshire, we've always had Republicans in the federal delegation, but since 2016 we can't get one elected, and the federal candidates are obviously the ones most closely associated with the presidency. So we view as someone like Nikki Haley as somebody who is going to be able to give other candidates a better shot of winning in a state, particularly a state like New Hampshire, a purple state. And frankly, we look at the whole opportunity to get out and make her case as having been successful. We've seen her poll numbers really sort of take off since we endorsed her. So it seems to be working. And I know obviously she's garnered the support of Governor Sununu as well as like the most popular politician, maybe the most popular politician in 15 or 20 years in New Hampshire.
Other than Vermin Supreme.
Vermin Supreme is hard to beat. I will tell you
is.
that Vermin Supreme is probably the most enjoyable people. For the viewers who don't know who Vermin Supreme is, you need to know who Vermin Supreme is. Vermin Supreme is that's his actual legal name.
Yep.
He is a chap from, I think, Rockport, Massachusetts, right on the coast of the North Shore. And he has an interesting campaign theme of free ponies for everybody, zombie power, things of that nature.
Yep.
He likes to campaign with a boot on his head
Yep.
and a giant toothbrush. So for those of you who have not experienced the Vermin Supreme experience, it's one of those quintessential First in the Nation things that I would encourage everybody
Absolutely.
to take advantage of.
Absolutely.
I remember I had only heard about him a little bit when I moved to New Hampshire 25 years ago. But I remember turning the corner on Elm Street and walking. I come around the sidewalk, I turn the corner, and there's this guy with this boot on his head. And it took me a second. I was like, okay, that's different. But then it took me a second. Oh, I know who that guy is.
Well, I'll tell you, this year
he's a character.
This year he's running in a Democratic primary, so the folks who are watching in a Democratic primary, I think Vermin Supreme is a great way to go for this cycle, particularly versus writing in Joe Biden. Let's have more fun with your vote. Vote for Vermin.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think
What
he would do
happens if
well.
Vermin Supreme wins the New Hampshire primary.
Then we can all go home.
trouble.
I think we all just say, okay, I'm done. Mic drop moment. I'm done. There's no more reason to continue working in politics. Oh. So so for everybody, I would just encourage them to take advantage of it. Go see a presidential candidate.
Yeah.
We get an opportunity that other states don't get. We can just go and walk up to and talk to a presidential candidate. We can go and walk up to a former president. We can go and walk up to all the major national people we see on news all the time, because they're all here too.
Sure.
All the various pundits and journalists, they're all here, and most of them are staying in Manchester, driving the room rates up to $600 a night. But if you wanted to meet some of these people that you see on TV all the time, just take advantage of the opportunity. Come down to Manchester or go out to an event, because a lot of those people, a lot of those pundits and journalists will be at those events.
Sure.
And go to the back of the room, not the front of the room, because that's where all those folks hang out. That's where they hang out. And a lot of them love talking with voters. In fact,
They do.
that's really what they want to do. They want to talk to voters. They want to understand what you're thinking. What is your decision-making process? How are you coming to where you're going to land in terms of the primary? And the one thing they truly love is if you haven't made up your mind. If
Yep.
you haven't made up your mind who you're voting for, by all means, go tell a journalist that, and they will love to just start asking you what your thinking is, how you're approaching it, what factors are going to make your mind up, and then you might end up being quoted in like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal.
Sure, and I mean, I think I think you're absolutely right. They want to know from the people who haven't made their mind up yet. That's more important to them in a lot of ways. You were talking about when you're an undeclared. When I first moved up here from Annapolis, we were undeclared. We were independents living down there. We really weren't involved with politics at all. And this state will give you the opportunity to get into politics at any level you want and go as far as you're willing to work for it. But one of the things happened to me was we registered, and I did not, I wanted to vote against Hillary Clinton So I think Obama was running then, right?
2008.
Yeah, 2008. So we made this big pact, like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We don't want Hilton in, so we're undeclared. We're going to go in and vote for Obama. Okay, so I did. On the way out, I did not know there was a table. Okay, so the first time I ever ran for office, they said, well, you took a Democrat ballot in 2008. And I said, yeah, but I didn't, I'm a Republican. When I had to go back and vote again, they said, no, you have to take a Democrat ballot. I said, I'm not doing that. And so a guy behind me said, we have same-day registration. Why don't you go register as a Republican? Which I did. And that was, I don't think that was the way it's supposed to be done.
No.
But I was able to do
necessarily.
that. I was able to do that. But that's something that when you, another state, when you're from another state, you don't know how that's supposed to work.
A distressing breakdown in the Deering town clerk's office.
Or a friend.
Yeah.
So is there any talk about closing that process, or at least in the primary process? Because you talked about the fact that we do have this open primary process, and not all states have that.
No.
Whatever you're registered as, that's the ballot you get when you walk in to do your primary.
Yeah, no, I mean, there have been, so first and foremost, parties themselves. So if the New Hampshire Republican State Committee wanted to, they could tell the Secretary of State to close the primary. You don't need to pass a law.
So it's a party-based item.
It's a party
Okay.
decision. Again, the courts have ruled the parties can do whatever they want. And so if the Republican Party or the Democratic Party went to the Secretary of State, and those are the only two parties that achieve ballot status, which means that in the last gubernatorial race you got 4% of the vote.
Yeah.
Or gubernatorial or Senate race, you got 4% of the vote. So in the Republicans and Democrats, the only two parties right now currently that have done so. But if the New Hampshire Republican State Committee,
Really? The Libertarians have never gotten 4%?
they did in
the state?
2016.
Yeah, they did.
Oh, okay.
2016, they were on the ballot till 2018. Then they weren't able to get, there was no Senate race, so it had to be the governor's race. So their Libertarian candidate did not achieve the 4%
Got it.
threshold. But it
I
has
was
to
just
be,
saying, it's like if any state's close to having a third party on the ballot, it should be New Hampshire with the Libertarians.
right. But if the Republican State Committee just said, just said, look, we're going to close primaries, and if you want to vote in a Republican primary, you have to be a registered Republican. Now, on one hand, you would definitely get more people who would register as Republican because they want to vote in primaries. On the other hand, and this is a counter argument, is that you want to be as appealing as possible to the people in the middle.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the discussion that takes
I agree
place.
with that, but I'm just worried about the flim-flam, right? I'm worried about the game playing that's going on, because we know it's happening and no one's admitting to it, right? No one's saying, yeah, we know a bunch of people registered or took a ballot just to screw with us, right? We know that's happening, and we know that it's happening in droves. We have news articles, we have billionaire donors that are encouraging it. The CEO of J.P. Morgan donating millions of money and saying, hey, go out and he's telling the Democrat voters in New Hampshire to go out and screw with it, right? Screw with the Republican. So we know that it's happening. That's why I'm kind of, like you said, there's arguments on both. We want to be open to the folks that are undeclared.
Right.
But if we close it, then we kind of force the undeclared to say, hey, make a
Well,
decision.
I think it's one of those
Show
cases.
some backbone, register with a party.
I think it's one of those mutually assured destruction. I think there's probably factions in the Republican and the Democratic parties that would love to close the primaries, but the Republicans won't do it if the Democrats don't do it, thinking the Democrats will suddenly have access to all those middle-of-the-road voters,
Yeah.
and the Democrats won't do it unless the Republicans
I
do it.
definitely agree. I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
No,
right?
I mean,
because there
We
are,
could in fact pass
I
a law.
don't like people
No,
playing games.
To be fair,
That's,
we could pass a law that says, at the state level, that says you can only vote in the primary for which you're registered. So that is something that could happen, and there might be enough support among both Republicans and Democrats to do that. But no one would want the optics of it. They probably want the policy, but they don't
Not
want
the-
want the
exactly,
optics.
right.
So everyone knows this is a purple state, and in terms of, since it is a purple state, everyone knows that they need to win over that narrow middle in order to be successful.
Exactly.
So no one wants to alienate that group.
no,
Yep.
I understand. Like I said, I just don't like the game playing, and we all know what's happening, and I may not have the answer, but I'm going to point it out when it happens.
Totally fair, totally fair.
So,
I agree. And look, we would never get to 330,000 people if it were totally closed. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? I will say this much, that there was a deadline in early October, October 6th, I believe it was the Friday, October 6th, that if you were a Democrat and you wanted to leave your party and re-register as undeclared, that was the last day. And I know that there were some efforts to try to convince Democrats to become undeclared so they could vote in the Republican primary. But the actual number of people who did that was really, really very small. So the Secretary of State came out with the numbers almost immediately thereafter and said, yeah, this wasn't a thing.
Right.
well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's good news. I mean, that's good to know, right? At least.
Because
At least there's
I
one
genuinely
stat
think
that I can hold on to is fairly good news.
I think that Democrats, if you're a Democrat, you probably want to be a Democrat, right? For a lot of people who are already in the party, that's part of their identity.
Sure.
And they you know, they don't, a lot of, there are a few people out there who like to play games, but those people are probably already registered as undeclared. They're probably not
Sure,
Democrats.
right.
Yeah.
Because the Democrats want that label, they want that brand with them.
Right. Got it.
But to your point, there are left to center people who typically vote in Democratic primaries who, since there's no action on their side, may well decide to jump in on the Republican side.
Yeah.
Aside from the current primary situation, what else does the AFP do? Like,
Sure.
The AFP exists outside of primary season.
Sure,
Just kind of go over that.
Oh, well, yeah, and outside of political,
Put your other hat
Right.
on.
political
Put your-
season generally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in addition to being senior advisor for AFP Action, I'm also a regional director for Americans for Prosperity. Americans for Prosperity is the largest free market grassroots organization in the country. We advocate for policies that lift barriers that, as we like to describe it, help people live the American dream of their choice. Not someone else's idea of what an American dream is, but an American dream of their choice. And what that means is people should have the ability to go out and, however they define success, not have government in particular be getting in the way and interfering with that. And we focus on policies that limit government, because whenever there's more government, there's more barriers.
Agreed.
And so we want to limit government, reduce regulations, and ultimately allow people to experience however they want to move towards success and happiness in their life the way they can do it. At the end of the day, we also want to try to, as an organization, build up other institutions in the community, because if the government is going to do less, we need other entities in society to step up and do more. Because if you don't, the second you turn your head, government's going to jump right back into that space. AFP has led a number of fights. For example, through the years, I'll just give you, we're the ones who led the fight to lower the state's 2 business taxes. People don't realize this, but at one point before 2015, New Hampshire had higher business taxes than Massachusetts. There's no time we should ever have higher taxes anywhere than Massachusetts. And we had higher business. It was an uncompetitive situation, and it was dragging our economy down. Well, we've since subsequently reduced our tax rates below Massachusetts, and our GDP growth, personal income growth, et cetera, all of the areas you'd like to measure to see success have taken off, and we're the fastest growing economy in the Northeast for that reason. Not only that, but the state that has the highest rate of inbound migration, which is kind of funny because I don't think we're building enough housing for all these people. But that's part of the reason why our housing situation has become so acute, is because so many people want to move into the state. AFP also led the efforts to phase out the interest and dividends tax, which is the only tax on income in New Hampshire. Led the fight with a strong coalition to pass education freedom accounts, which means that poor and working class children are now able to take the opportunity to go to find an education that best suits their needs, as opposed to the one that is based on the zip code of their public
Right.
school. So those are the types of policies that we've been leading on, trying to bring more freedom and give more opportunity to people. Basically, I tell people we're trying to make our state motto a reality.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Absolutely.
I like it.
So he's slowing down here, but
Yeah.
we typically do some absurd things that are going on in the news, and I think
There's no shortage of those.
no, we have a bunch of them. So I know that he's
Well-
got a favorite one he'd like to.
Yeah, we
So
can
if you don't
talk about
mind,
that.
we'll do that,
Absolutely.
and you can chip in with some absurd things if you like. We did that with Terry Roy last
Oh, good.
last week, and he came up with one right away, and it was kind of fun.
But the window blowing a hole in the airplane, that was a good one.
Yep. We're going to expand on that a little bit. That was one of the ones from last week, but we're going to expand on it because a whole bunch of other stuff. But let's get to a couple of others. I mean, there's this huge push for electric vehicles.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I don't want to be stuck in an electric vehicle when the battery dies when it's -10 outside. And something like that happened in Chicago.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did. And the thing was, they also said that they could charge them quickly, and it ended up taking 2 or 3 hours to charge it. And one woman said, I needed some help getting out of there because it was so frozen. I couldn't get the device in to do it. And here's what happened. When she moved the car out, somebody moved in and took her spot. She had to wait another 3 hours to get it. So
So these cars are supposed to fast charge in like 40 minutes, and it's taken 2.5, 3 hours. And there's just a line of dead cars sitting at a charging station in Chicago. And it's just all these, like, you cannot bring a gas can full of electricity to an electric car and get them going again.
But you can bring like a Honda generator, put it in your trunk. When you run out, you just charge your car up.
And then,
And the Honda generator powered by gas.
Right. That's the point.
and then you've got this going on, and then you've got the same municipality saying, hey, you got to unplug all your appliances at night because we're using too much electricity. So unplug your car that you need to get to work in the morning.
So
right?
my favorite one was that Kamala Harris now has a candle scent. It's her scent. And what she does is when people go to visit the White House, if she takes them on tour, they come and see her, she gives them a candle. So I thought that was quite absurd. But we've had some really strange things. And also I found out in California that if you're trans, you will get a monthly stipend of $1,200 from the government because it may be tougher for you to compete in the job market. Now, it would seem to me in California it wouldn't be harder to compete, but I just found it very absurd that they're actually talking about that stuff. You know,
Yeah, it's
Gavin
crazy.
Newsom is like, he's incredible.
It's amazing someone like Gavin Newsom who is competing. I don't know with whom he's competing to be the most liberal guy out there, and he's trying to figure out his lane for 2028.
Yeah, probably.
So
It's
his,
just driving
It might be
people away from the
Buttigieg.
state.
It might be Buttigieg who won here.
right.
I mean, that's maybe who.
Well, he came in a close second. Bernie Sanders didn't win here by 1.5 points, but it felt like Buttigieg won because Bernie won by 20 against Hillary in 2016. So
Yeah.
it felt like a win.
That's a
for
good
Buttigieg.
point. Yeah.
So yeah, you know, here's one interesting stat. Iowa, New Hampshire. We talked about that. One of the things that I did a little research and I found is that Iowa and New Hampshire have not gone for the same person. The last time in a competitive primary they went for the same person, 1976.
Really?
Both went for Gerald Ford over Ronald Reagan. So that was the last time that Iowa and New Hampshire went for the same candidate. So
Holy smokes! Didn't know that. It's interesting.
here's one trivial piece you can sound really smart over the next few days.
Think about that. All right. Let's get to this airplane business. Some of my viewers know I've said it before. I got my pilot's license when I was 16 years old. Right. So I understand flying. I understand aviation. I understand a lot of it. We had this piece of an airplane fall off an airplane in midair last week. Let's show this video. It's a parody. It appeared on Twitter, and so let's give that a show.
Welcome aboard, folks. We are very proud to share that your pilot is the most diverse pilot on record. She is a 3'2" transgender pansexual Native American man who identifies as a 6'tall Korean woman. Any volunteers to help reach the controls are welcome. You will want to buckle up as her epilepsy is often triggered by the flashing lights in the cockpit. remember to keep a whisper volume level, as she may have to consult instructional videos as a refresher during the flight. Now, can we get a big cheer for diversity?
Biggest fellow who's not very happy.
Welcome aboard.
Okay, so that's a parody, but we're not too far off from that, folks, right? And the reason, right? You know, you see side of the airplane blowing out and people falling out the window, and the whole point is that the airline has prioritized diversity over safety, and that's actually happening. Right? So let's show the picture here. Let's show this photograph. You see this fella? You can't see. It's the same guy on both sides. That is the CEO of United Airlines.
Oh, jeez.
Okay? This is the CEO of United Airlines. That's okay. We can finish that. So on July 29th, United Airlines plane suffered from a hard landing, and the plane was nearly totaled. The co-pilot of the plane was a former flight attendant who had been fired from their post and then rehired as part of United Airlines' DEI program, even though their name appeared on a list of employees who could not return to the company. Moreover, the individual failed numerous trainings, including crucial simulating training that pilots must undergo. United Airlines is prioritizing DEI over safety. All right? Now, as far as that plug falling out of the airplane, all right, that plug, the responsibility for that plug goes to Spirit Aerospace, not to be confused with Spirit Airlines, but Spirit Aerospace, which Boeing uses to finalize their fuselages when they're delivered, prior to being delivered to the airlines. Well, Spirit Airlines, or Spirit Aerospace, posted very proudly on Twitter that their entire engineering team is an all-diverse engineering team. All women, all minority engineering team responsible for this plug that flew out of the airplane. I mean, we're all going to die. Somebody's going to die. We're going to start experiencing deaths due to DEI. In 2021, Boeing, only product safety, employee safety, and quality. Those are the three items used as operational performance criteria to judge bonuses for company executives. Boeing's interested in product safety, employee safety, and quality. In 2022, they made a change. Product safety, employee safety, and quality are no longer the qualifications for a bonus. Anybody want to guess what the new bonus items are? Climate, diversity, equity, inclusion are the criteria for judging operational performance. Up to 40% of executives' potential pay is in that annual incentive pay program, which includes diversity, equity, inclusion, and climate. Not safety, not quality, not, all right? The annual incentive bonus tied to DEI targets for Boeing is more than the base salary for the CEO and CFO. So, if you're a hiring manager at Boeing and you knew you were going to get a bonus, you can hire the most qualified individual, or you can hire a qualified individual that meets a diversity standard. Are you going to be hiring the most qualified person? Or as an executive, are you going to be looking for your bonus? We're tying money and safety to this DEI garbage. All right? Next, the FAA just released this last week a statement. The FAA is now hiring the severely mentally handicapped. Quote from their website: targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. They include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism. All of those were just parodied in that video. But the FAA is prioritizing hiring based on those qualifications. And the FAA includes air traffic control.
Yep.
There's another incident with air traffic control in an airport just north of Houston a couple of months ago, where a pilot undergoing commercial check ride, which is their test to become a commercial pilot, and the instructor in the aircraft, they requested what is known as a short final, right? And a short final means that you kind of cut inside the normal pattern, and you truncate your landing, right? And part of the commercial test is what's called a power off 180. So you're on your downwind leg, and then you turn base, and then you turn final, and then you're landing, right? So you're parallel to the runway, coming the opposite direction that you plan on landing. And they pull power. And the whole point is for the pilot to learn how to manage the potential energy that's in the aircraft already without using his engines to kind of glide and turn and make that landing without power, right? It's not necessarily an emergency procedure. It's a standard procedure for, quickening things up. But it is a short final. They called for a short final. ATC approved it. And then as they were doing it, ATC is watching it. Oh, what are you doing? You're inside. You're taking too long. You should have turned. You should have started your turn beam the numbers, which is further back. And the pilot says, no, that's not what a short final is. We're doing a power off 180. And the ATC woman fired. And I listened to the recording, and as a pilot, it's absolutely maddening. She started arguing with the pilot.
As
So now-
he's flying it.
As he's flying it. You are arguing with the command pilot of an aircraft during the most dangerous and most busy time in that cockpit. We call it getting overwhelmed, right? Because there's so many things going on in the cockpit as you're trying to navigate and land. You're dealing with power, you're dealing with flaps, you're dealing with engine issues, you're dealing with speed, you're dealing with your sink rate and whatnot. It is very easy to get overwhelmed. It's a very dangerous position to be in. And she's sitting there going back and forth arguing. And eventually she says, well, you're wrong. I Googled it.
Oh, God.
ATC is telling a pilot how to fly a plane because she Googled it. Turns out she was a diversity hire. So in every aspect of flying, not just a plug falling out of your airplane. Every aspect of flying we've seen is now, safety is not the priority anymore. I'm not going to stop flying, but I'm certainly not thrilled about the prospects. We haven't had a major airline crash in a couple of decades here in the United States. And, through the 80s and 90s, there were quite a few aircraft.
Yeah.
You get one every other year or so. It's been a couple of decades since there's been a major incident. There's been these minor incidents like that landing of that United aircraft in July. And there's been literally an uptick of hundreds of near misses with ground control and pattern work. It's going to happen. Somebody's going to die because of these policies. And we're not going to admit to it. And it's very maddening. And it's absurd. Anyway, that's my rant. That's my rant for today.
You get one more rant.
Flying the friendly skies.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
never mind. Wasn't it United that was like beating their passengers a couple of years ago? Remember
Dragging
that?
them out, dragging
Yeah.
them out of the...
Yeah.
So do you ever see any of that fun while you're flying? I mean, people getting crazy on airplanes. It seems to me like people have no patience anymore on a plane.
I'll tell you
No
that
courtesy.
just I think the rigidity of the policy enforcement during COVID just took us to a place in air travel where people are just starting to just show their worst,
Yeah.
and we see their worst. And so I would just, I just try to tell everybody when, just relax.
Yeah.
Except that now he's terrified us all about the idea of being a player.
I'm not making any of this up. These are all true stories, and they're all true stories within the last 7 days.
And the thing that scares me, this is like when you say to the pitcher, you know, got a no-hitter going into the 7th inning, and the announcer makes that announcement, he loses it. On the
Right.
next, well, that's what you're saying. We haven't had an accident in how many decades, and now
Yeah, I hope
That's
I didn't
okay.
jinx it, but I just want to be on record as saying
can't
right,
be doing that.
There was also Southwest Airlines posted a picture of an all-female flight crew, and they immediately got lambasted online by women all over the country. Said that's great, I love it, but if a man does it better, I'd prefer that. I want the most qualified,
Sure.
not the most diverse.
Yeah.
Right? And we have to start taking a hard line on things like safety. We cannot substitute in certain areas.
Yeah, like healthcare.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Healthcare is.
I don't want my brain surgeon to be diverse. I want them to be the best, regardless of the color of their skin or what's in their pants.
Sometimes you just don't want to know. But no, I mean, I think it speaks to an issue that companies, obviously, they saw the reaction after the George Floyd incident in 2020.
Yeah.
They didn't want to be targeted by the left. The left was doing an effective job at targeting, and then they've instituted these policies where meritocracy has been kicked to the side.
Yes.
And I
right.
think that a lot, you're starting to see some people. I know Bill Ackman, who's a activist investor, has set up a fund which is now sort of an anti-DEI fund. I know
we're
Vivek
starting to back
Ramaswamy.
off. Some
Yeah.
people are starting to realize that we've gone too far.
Vivek Ramaswamy was created Strive Capital, which was an anti-DEI.
Right.
Right.
And look, I think that there's going to be more and more of a market for people who say, if we're talking about investment, I want to give it to the guy who's going to make me the most money.
Sure.
And I think if we
Right.
get back to making money, then I think that a lot of this DEI stuff will go by the wayside. And particularly what happened with the Harvard president.
Oh, yeah, we had that one CEO who says, I'm not hiring Harvard people anymore.
Yeah.
If that's what they're coming
So
from.
we're running out of time. So I want to thank you so much for coming on. And next week we have Representative Jess Edwards.
Yep, and we will most likely be talking quite a bit about what happens next Tuesday. So we'll know the results of next Tuesday next week, and we'll talk to you then.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.